Started.
Good morning.
Thank you, sir. Good morning to you. So yesterday I ran personal errands. I also had some house tasks to work on. Today I will be relaxing. Long day yesterday. Actually, it's been a long week. Um, I do have impediments because the stuff I'm working on in my house has not been rectified yet. I can't resolve it. I need the city to come do it. So my impediment is Baltimore City right now. So we'll see how working through that goes, and I know it's going to be a process. So I will pass it on to you.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Eugene. Last name is pronounced Celestin. Yesterday, I worked on my day off. Today, I plan on, also yesterday, I did a little bit of reading. This morning, I did some reading as well. I plan on doing a little bit later on today with my editor, finishing up some videos. And my impediment is I need some money. I got no bread. I just paid a bill this morning and it's not looking good. So that's the impediment.
Good morning, I'm Andre. What I did yesterday, spend time with my daughters, my 2-year-old, my 10-month-old, and I even played 2K with my 12-year-old. I plan on doing a day, spending some time with my wife, because we getting so busy, really don't get a chance to spend time with her. And impediment, shoot, tomorrow's Monday, so the grind restarts. Gotta go back in the classroom tomorrow.
Okay. And thank you all. That was a great exercise. That was, like I said, called the daily stand-up. It's something whenever you're on an IT team, specifically in Scrum, where we're training for, you're supposed to do a daily stand-up daily. So if you work Monday through Friday, it's supposed to go Monday through Friday. But some teams, they adjust their schedule. Prime example, the team I'm working with, we do our daily stand-up Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So sometimes people don't follow the Scrum Guide 2020 or the Agile Manifesto to the T. So just let you know, sometimes you got to be a little bit more adaptive towards whatever organization you're with. So that was a great practice for us. And how today's class will go, we have I'm going to give you a quick overview on what the course outline is going to be. Let me share my screen right now for that. Just to let you all know what we plan on getting into for the next couple weeks, the next 8 weeks. And also I want to, from here, after I show you this course outline, we will go over quickly over the Agile Manifesto and the Scrum Guide 2020. Last but not least, we have a PowerPoint presentation. When we get to the PowerPoint presentation, please hold your questions to the end. You can write them down or you can write them in the chat. We are recording this, so we may use some of this footage for later on, but nonetheless, this is an overview of our class right now. This is week 1, which we'll be working on right now. And week 2 is the Scrum role. So if you all don't know exactly what role you want to be in IT, whether it's a Scrum Master, Agile Coach, business analyst, or product owner, throughout the conversations that we have and throughout the conversations that we have and throughout the readings that we give you, hopefully you get a little bit more understanding, in-depth understanding on what you want to do. All right, with that being said, let's get to the, let's bring up the Agile Manifesto first. How about that? And just want to confirm, everyone read that, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Let me bring that up right here. And I just want to kind of focus on the key points of the Agile Manifesto right now. Like I said, it's about, we'll say it's about 12 principles that kind of guide the Agile Manifesto. It is 12 principles. Let me share my screen so we can kind of go over that. And if you all have any questions on it, let us know, because this is kind of like your Bible. This is kind of how how you facilitate your Scrum ceremonies. This is how you, if you have any questions, you rely back on this whenever it comes to the job. Like I said, it's a quick read, but it's very important. It's a lot to unpack. Like I said, out of the 12 principles, what were the key gems that we've gained from it? And of course, we can write this up for you all and send it to you via email. But the number one thing we gained from this is highest priority is to satisfy through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. So when you unpack that, like I said, the number one priority is to be quick adapting early and just continuously be willing to adjust and adapt. And like I said, valuable software is important as well. When you think about that, it's an acronym that we used in Scrum that we'll get to later on, but it's called INVEST. And we'll break that down later on, but the V in INVEST stands for valuable. So whatever you are creating in this incremental software, well, you're not actually creating, but the team is creating, it has to be valuable. So it has to, at the end of the day, do something for the overall project. Once again, that was number one. Number two, welcome changing requirements, even late, harness change for continuous competitive advantage. So number two, the keywords is changing requirements. Things will change on the sporadic basis based upon what stakeholders desire, aka the CEO, aka your board of directors or your product owner, whoever is delivering the requirements to the rest of the team. Requirements which are actionable items may change. So for our class, we'll use WhatsApp for an example, since we all are familiar with WhatsApp and we have WhatsApp. Say if WhatsApp originally wanted to be, WhatsApp originally wanted just to be a chat platform, just a text to chat. Hey, instead of using your regular messaging app, whether it's your iMessage or with Android, Android default messenger, WhatsApp wanted everyone to download WhatsApp and make this the default messenger system for anyone and everyone that has a smart device, whether it's a smartphone, tablet, computer, anything to that nature. So how the way WhatsApp was changing requirements is they told their Scrum teams, and like I said, this is just for this example, hey, I know we originally said that we are just a text messaging, a messaging company, but now we want to do video. So we all, I'm sure you all seen the transformation of WhatsApp, how it went from just messaging to now messaging and video. So when WhatsApp, long story short, when WhatsApp came out 5 to 10 years ago, let's say 10 years ago, they didn't know that we will have 4G, 5G technology in the future. Of course, they guesstimated that technology would get better, faster, quicker, but they didn't know that, hey, eventually we'll be able to do video chat. And who knows, in the near future, they're saying WhatsApp, we may be able to send and receive money with it. But of course, we can't do that now, but that may be something in the near future. All right. The number three thing that we received from the Agile Manifesto is deliver working software frequently, whether that's a couple weeks or a couple months. As we all read, a sprint ceremony is anywhere between anywhere between 2 weeks and 4 weeks. Some companies, they do a little shorter. Some companies do a little longer, but that's the typical time box of a sprint. So delivering workable working software frequently. So quickly, which is in that time box timestamp, as opposed to months at a time, years at a time. Oh, at the end of the project, you'll get everything. No, you're going to get this one piece of the project in this certain amount of time. And so then they'll, you know, with Scrum, we built incremental little pieces at one time, as opposed to building the whole thing at one time. So little pieces frequently. Number 4, business people and developers must work together throughout project. So business people, as we know in this scenario, are people like us. We're the business people. We're the Scrum masters, which, you know, facilitate the Scrum. We're the product owners that, you know, receive the requirements and give them off to the rest of the Scrum team, or we are the business analysts. So we're not tech savvy, but I mean, we're not technical, which means we don't write code, but we're the people that work together with the developers that write the code, the front and back end code. We also meet with stakeholders, the large stakeholders, whether that's the CEO or the chair of the departments, to understand exactly what's needed for this piece of software that we're building. All right, number 5, build projects and motivate people. Basically, environment and support, trust they will succeed. So as we all know, as a facilitator, as a coach, as a servant leader, you're supposed to just pretty much motivate and understand that as a team, you win as a team or you lose as a team. So some of you all are, some people on the call may be coaches, parents, anything in between. And just like any type of person, if you motivate them the right way and you keep positive energy, then the stars are the limit for your team. And that's the same thing when it comes to software development. It's first just an idea. A piece of software is just an idea. And so then eventually from the team, it finally grows into a finished product. Number 6, agile processes promote sustainable development, maintain a consistent pace. So by sustainable, you're building slowly but surely, but not too slow. But you want to make sure that it's sizable. We're going back to that acronym that I spoke about earlier, INVEST. And it has to be the S in INVEST stands for sizable. The piece of software has to be sustainable to be able to be built throughout that 2 to 4 week time span. If you're trying to build something too large, then at one sprint, then essentially the team may fail, and that may cause technical debt. And you know, from there it continues to be a trickle down effect, a snowball effect, and eventually it may affect the team, their morale, and eventually some people may want to hop off the project. So that's not the goal. The goal is to keep the team motivated and make them feel like, you know, whatever they're building is sustainable. They're not having burnout, or they're not building something so small that it's now become boring and repetitive. So you want to keep the team interested, and as a coach, as a motivator, as a facilitator, that's something you'll do throughout the journey. All right. Number 7, working software is a primary measure of progress. As mentioned, the software has to work, and throughout the time of building that software, like I said, throughout that sprint, which is anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks, at the end of the sprint, we want to test. We want to test through UAT, user acceptance testing, and which is when the end user may test that product, that finished product. We want to test, and it's funny because we want to go back to that acronym INVEST. The T at the end of INVEST stands for testable. So that whatever we're building, aka whatever the developers are building, needs to be testable. Because we're facilitators, fortunately enough for us, we're not the ones testing. We're just making sure, okay, one-to-one, okay, that checks out, cool. The developers more so show us what they're testing if we want to see it. But at the end of the day, with Scrum, everybody's self-organizing. So if your developers say they've done it, they did it for the most part. Especially if you have a mature group, a mature team of developers, they know exactly what they're doing. Everybody's self-organizing. It's just like having, and I love using analogies. You'll hear some analogies throughout the class. It's just like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant on their team. Even though they have a coach, they sometimes will self-organize. They know, hey, I could be sporadic, I'll freestyle, I may cause an audible, but at the end of the day, I'm going to find a way to help the team win. So hopefully you understand that example, but with mature veteran team players, developers, aka your Kobe's or your Michael Jordans, they will be able to self-organize a little bit better or a little bit faster than some of your immature or your more novice teams. But nonetheless, they're still self-organizing and they'll still be able to get things done without you being a micromanager. Nobody likes that, especially in the Scrum world. All right. Number 8, most efficient and effective method to communicate is face-to-face. Prior to this, the pandemic that we are living in, majority of the meetings, specifically the daily stand-up and all the other sprint ceremonies, were in person. But now we're in a virtual environment. We still can build software, and face-to-face interaction is the best channel of communication. So whenever you are on calls, like for example, right now we're on a call, it's always nice to see other people's faces. Video chat, usually you want to keep your camera on, especially because you're still at work. So a lot of people think that, hey, we may not be able to see each other virtually. But at the end of the day, you can still see each other virtually. And thank you for those who put on their camera. Number 9, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design agility. So when they say technical excellence, that means you want to make sure it's at the top of, you want to make sure you do the best you can to, and once again, these are the developers. They're using some of the best software in the game. They're basically making sure that they're monitoring and they're paying attention to whatever they're building. And ultimately at the end of the build, they are going to test it to make sure that it is sustainable and it's working. Simplicity, that's number 10. The art of maximizing the amount of work that's being done, that's essential, and the work that's not being done. So if it's some type of work that you may not have all the information on, there may be some impediments, which are, roadblocks or bottlenecks. A bottleneck, you're going to hear us say that a lot. A bottleneck is if you literally look at a Coke bottle, any type of bottle, at the top of the bottle, it's the neck of the bottle, and it's kind of hard to pour out something or get something done when that bottleneck is all the way at the top. So basically something that's stopping the full flow of that bottle. With that being said, if there is some type of impediments, bottlenecks, or we are relying on some other teams, aka some other, and we need to create some type of enabler splits. Hey, prime example, and I'll go to building a house example. You can't build, you can't put the, say if you're building a brick house, you can't put the struts and you can't put the 4x4s down and you can't build the bricks up in the house without building a foundation first. That foundation is an enabler, and that's an enabler in our opinion. It's an enabler sprint. It's something that needs to be done in precedence prior to getting to the original build of the house. So And that's what we're focused on when we talk about simplicity. Things that you could work on without any type of impediments, bottlenecks, anything in between. That's what you do. You simplify your work. But at the end of the day, you want to maximize getting the work done in a required timestamp. So always working on whatever that foundation may be. So eventually you can build brick by brick and put the foundational struts so you can finalize that house. All right, number 11, and we're almost done. It's like I said, it's 12 principles that we feel like are the main principles based upon this document that you all read. And it's a lot to dive into, but best architects, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. And that's vital. We talked about that earlier with Scrum, what makes this very unique from if you had a project manager or anything in between, the team is self-organizing. Hey, I am and I go back to the house example. Hey, I am a plumber. So as a plumber, I'm going to self-organize and I'm going to fix the faucet. No, I'm not a plumber and I'm going to fix the HVAC system. I'm going to self-organize and I'm going to choose exactly what I can fix when I can fix it. And that's the same thing with our front end and back end developers. They know exactly what their expertise is. And that's why they're on this team. And they're going to tell us exactly what they're going to build when they're going to build it. So the team is very self-organizing. 12, the 12 principle, last but not least, during intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective and adjust. And that's very interesting. I love that. I love that point of the Agile Manifesto. What they just mentioned is the team being able to adjust accordingly, and the team being able to talk about their flaws, to talk about their issues. Prime example, this morning we did our daily stand-up, and a team that's not willing to self-organize, or a team that doesn't have accountability issues, I mean, that's not accountable, they wouldn't have said no impediment. No, I don't have no impediments. I have no bottlenecks. They're keeping it to themselves. But as a self-organizing team that reflects on whatever is going well, what's not going well, we're going to talk about in an open, transparent space. Hey, this is what's going on. Hopefully somebody can help me out. All right. And like I said, thank you all. Hopefully you all retrieve that from the 12 principles around the Agile Manifesto. I'll send that to you all, the 12 gems that we've gleaned from this document right here. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns?
I appreciate the breakdown of it. I didn't even realize it when I was reading it. It was 12 principles, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, question. Can I get the investment acronym?
Yes, definitely. And I'll send that out in an email as well, along with the 12 principles that we've gleaned off of this. But INVEST stands for, and I'm the type, even though if somebody sends me something, sometimes writing it down helps you out with remembering it as well. But the I stands for independent. Each user story, and we'll break down user stories a little later on, each user story has to be independent. So it can be worked on by itself. Independent, that's the I. The N stands for negotiable. The team can negotiate on, hey, if this is and we'll talk about this a little later on, it's called the Fibonacci sequence. If this user story is large or is it small, and it's very subjective based upon the team and how mature or novice the team is. Valuable, we talked about valuable earlier. The V stands for valuable. Does this whatever we're about to build, this in this small increment, does it add value to the full project? Estimatable. Can we estimate how long or how small this user story is? Sized. Is it sizable? Is it too large, or does it need to be broken down into smaller pieces? As they say, you could eat an elephant one bite at a time, not all at once. And last but not least, testable. Through UAT or whatever type of testing, we need to, which is user acceptance testing. Once again, we need to test this piece of software before we say it's finally finished. So invest, independent, negotiable, valuable, estimatable, sizable, testable.
Cool. Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions in regards to the Agile Manifesto before we go to the Scrum Guide 2020?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, team, and let's come back around, let's say 7 minutes. Let's come back at 9:35 you all's time.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, team, and we are back. We want to time box accordingly and make sure we get back on time. All right. So right now we will briefly, we won't go as in depth with the Scrum Guide 2020. It's a little longer, but we just want to give a quick overview on what's that about and how Scrum was created. The Scrum situation as a whole, Scrum ceremonies, Scrum, Agile, everything in between. So just to give you a quick overview, Scrum has been around since the early 90s. It was a small group of IT people that came together with the likes of a gentleman by the name of Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schreiber. They met and they felt like this framework was very essential and value to create software in a faster light. Prior to Scrum and Agile, it was mainly Waterfall. Most software development life cycles, and we call that SDLC. That's the acronym SDLC, Software Development Life Cycle. Back in the day, prior to the 90s, was just a waterfall type of build. So the best example I could give for that is let's think about a cake. When building a cake in a waterfall type of atmosphere, you're trying to build the whole cake at one time. So that means you're building, say if you're building a 7-layer cake, you're trying to build the first layer, second layer. I mean, you're putting all the ingredients together and you're trying to build this whole cake at one time, which may take a lot longer. And while you're building that cake, you may find out that the end user, aka whoever, say if you're a cake company, say the person that want the cake, initially they said, hey, I want a pound cake with cherry topping, cherry icing on top. And if you're building on a waterfall type of basis, you're starting and you're putting all the ingredients for that type of cake, a pound cake with cherry icing on the top. And if your end user comes back like midway through, say if you have a week to build this cake, they may come through midway and say, hey, I know I said I wanted a pound cake with cherry icing on the top, but hey, I changed my mind. Now I actually want a pound cake with grape icing on top, whatever that may be. If you did this waterfall approach, you'll pretty much have to start from scratch because you've, in your mind and based upon, your requirements and based upon, what you've already done, this is tailored for that pound cake with the cherry icing on top. But if you did the Scrum way, you did an agile approach, which is fast adapting. You're building one piece of the cake at a time. So say if you, like I said, say if it was a 3-layer cake, if you only were building that first layer, you could kind of be adjustable and tell that your end user, hey, we kind of already started the cake. We do have it as a pound cake right now. We didn't put icing on it yet. So because your requirements are fast adjusting and I mean, you have changing requirements, like we kind of talked about number 2 for the Agile Manifesto. We can adapt to that, and guess what? We could put that grape topping on the top. We could put the grape icing on top. So that's a little bit of an example of, hey, how this Agile Scrum framework has been very vital, because as we know with software, things can change all the time, especially with technology being emerging and the evolution of technology. All right. So with that being said, like I said, with the Scrum Guide 2020, and this is the 2020 version of it because there was former versions of it, but this is the latest and greatest version of it. Let me share my screen and I have it up in front of me. Just want to confirm everybody read that, correct?
I believe I looked into it. It was a few different ones. I don't know if I was able to finish, but I definitely looked into it.
Okay. All right. So I will resend it to you all via the chat, but this was the document. Once again, it's a little longer than the first one. It's 14 pages, and it's very important. If I was you, while you're reading this, you want to take notes. Like I said, it literally reads the definitive guide to Scrum, the rules of the game. It's just like any other game, you can't play it without knowing the rules. So, like I said, this is a quick overview of it, and this is a index of what's going on with it, on the purpose of Scrum. It kind of breaks down what everybody's role is. Like I say, if you're a Scrum Master, you're the facilitator, you're the servant leader, product owner. You work on complex problems based upon a product backlog, and we'll start diving into some of this language. If you never heard of product backlog, it's like a long list of things that you want to do throughout the duration of the project. And sometimes, when I say long, it's thousands of user stories, which are actions that needs to be done. A product backlog it may take years, it may take a decade to get through. So look at it as a long-term, long-term type of list. It's like a to-do list for the IT team, the developers, the Scrum team, the product owner, the Scrum Master. It's a long list. And so then from the product backlog, we have the sprint backlog, which is a smaller list that comes in based upon the larger list. So you have the product backlog, which is a large list. It's like long-term. And so then you have the sprint backlog, which is short-term. Hey, we're going to get this done in the sprint ceremonies, whether that's, like I mentioned, usually anywhere between 2 weeks and 4 weeks. We're going to get it, this item, this item, this item, whatever items that everybody is self-organized and mentioned that we would do. But like I said, it talks about the philosophies under Scrum and how the way it was created. It talks about the what Scrum is. It's imperialism, which is, like I said, it's very interesting. It's lean thinking based upon empirical evidence. You want to make sure that we're trying to reduce waste, and we're trying to focus on the most important essentials. So always being with empirical thinking, you are thinking on the go, and you're trying to solve these complex problems as fast as possible. With Scrum, there are 3 pillars, and you're reading it right here. The 3 pillars are transparency, inspection, and adaption. And this is very important to understand. This is something important to really glean in on whenever you're interviewing or whenever you're speaking to your teams. You want to be 100% transparent with each other. How the way you're transparent is kind of like what we mentioned earlier. You're talking about your impediments. You're talking about your bottlenecks. You're talking about if you made any mistakes. You're talking about your wins as well. Hey, we got this done at this time. You're just being 100% honest, being 100% transparent, so you can build trust through your organization and through your teams. Also, by being transparent, it enables you to inspect. By inspecting, you're pretty much you're looking at, hey, what you did, if it's desirable, undesirable, if there are any problems. You're just making sure that whatever you're building is working, or if it's not working, you want to reach out to the people that can assist you with building whatever you're inspecting. And after inspection, it becomes adaption. By inspecting, it enables you to adapt. You're adjusting accordingly to what's going on with the project. Whether the project is getting a little difficult, okay, we're going to adapt, and we're going to swarm this. And this is another word, IT word that you want to get in your vocab bank. But you, based upon adapting, you're now swarming a project. So For example, say if we had, we'll go back to the WhatsApp example. Say if we had 2 developers that was working on, on the back end for WhatsApp to create payments. I mean, to receive payments and you can send payments. Say if that back end developer was having issues building, or say if they're over capacity, they're at capacity, which means that they are working on so many things at one time. They don't have enough time to work on building out the currency portion of WhatsApp. We may bring another developer in, and if 2 developers are working on one thing at one time, that's called swarming. So we were able to adapt and we were able to adjust and bring somebody else in as well, so we can get the end goal done in a timely manner. So always being able to adapt and understand what's going on with your team is very important. But those are 3 Scrum pillars, very important, near and dear. Transparency, inspection, adaption. If you do all 3 of those, that's how you pretty much get these 5 values. You get commitment. If a developer is very happy with their team, they feel like they're adding value, and they feel like their work is worth something, they're going to stay committed. They're going to stay focused. They're going to stay open if they feel like, hey, nobody's judging me. I can speak about whatever I desire to speak about, and from my Scrum Master to my PM, they'll give me some type of constructive criticism, but they will never judge me or make me feel belittled. So you want to make sure you're open. You want to respect your team. People are going to tell you things that you may not want to hear, or people are going to, have family issues or whatever have you. So you want to respect that team. You want to have kind of like a work-life relationship with your team. Sometimes I open up with my team, let them know, hey, this was going on with my family, or this, that, and the other. But you just want to be open and respectful with your team. Don't talk about everything, but you want to at least kind of open up a little bit, just so the rest of the team opens up. And last but not least, you want to have courage. So like I said, this is the Scrum Values. And so then this kind of breaks down the Scrum team. As I mentioned earlier, with this class, the goal is to be one of these, one of these 2 things up top, either Scrum Master, Product Owner, and last thing is a Business Analyst. None of us really want to be developers because that's more technical. And if you wanted to be a front end and back end developer, reach out to me outside of the class, and I could get you connected with the right people. And this pretty much talks about how many people are on each team. Usually it's 10 or fewer. You don't ever want to have your teams too large, but essentially as the Scrum Master, you don't facilitate that. Usually your project manager or whoever your boss is kind of decides that. As we mentioned earlier, accountability is key. And so then we create value. This more so talks about the developers, what the developers' jobs are throughout the sprint ceremonies. So you want to understand exactly what your development team, your developers are doing. And this kind of gives you a quick overview on what they do. Your product owner, if you all are interested in becoming product owners, this is exactly what a product owner does. And this is coming straight from the Scrum Guide 2020. So just understanding that this is the key prerequisites to being a product owner. You developing and explicitly communicating the product goal, creating and clearly communicating product backlog items, that long list that we mentioned earlier, ordering product backlog items. So, hey, we want this to happen. Oh, okay, this came from leadership. This needs to go on top of this. So prime example, with leadership, we'll go back to the WhatsApp example. As we know, Facebook owns WhatsApp. Say if Mark Zuckerberg spoke to his product owner and say, Dre, you're the product owner. He mentioned to you, hey, I know at first our product backlog had 3 items on it. We've already checked off. We want to do text messages with WhatsApp. And so then we wanted to do exchange money. And so say we only had 2 items. Those are the only 2 items. Oh, all of a sudden, we see that our end users like to video chat, especially because of the pandemic. I think now we need to do video chat. Scratch everything else that we're doing. Let's put video chat all the way at the top. So now our developers need to work on video chat within the next sprint, which is in the next 2 or 4 weeks. And so then we need to release it to the public. So that's ordering the product backlog based upon what adds more value and ultimately what creates stakeholders' wealth. This is a business like any other business. So with any business, the end goal of business is to add to shareholders or stakeholders' wealth. So however that may make the team, the organization more valuable, and essentially what generates more money for the organization, that's most important. So that's how your product owner will get that information disseminated to them, and they'll disseminate that information to the rest of the team. And last but not least, ensuring that the product backlog is transparent, visible, and understood. We'll show you some examples later on throughout the this class, but there are various different project management tools from, and we'll show you all Jira, but there's Jira and Confluence. They work in two and two together. They have Azure DevOps, which is Microsoft's version of a project management tool. There's Raleigh.com. Some people, they may have used Monday.com or Slack. These are certain tools that kind of shows you how the product backlog is defined. Hey, these are the 1,000 things in order, chronological order, or disseminating order. This is what we need to work on. All right, so that's kind of the duties of a product owner. Next, we'll go to a Scrum Master. Like I said, this is something that we all want to read, but a Scrum Master is a true leader who serves the Scrum team and the organization at large. But this is what the Scrum Master does. Coach the team members and to self-manage and for cross-functionality. The team is self-organizing, and if we need to reach out to other members, whether it's leadership or somebody from another team, we want to be able to be cross-functional. So the end goal is we get to the end goal. Helping the Scrum team focus on creating high-value increments that meet the definition of done. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in one of our future classes, but like I said, it's got to be something that's of value to the organization and to the team that you're on, and it has to meet the definition of done, which is, hey, based upon all these requirements for this user story or this one action, it has to check this for it to be stamped done, definition done. So, and like I said, we'll go into the difference between definition of ready and definition of done in future classes. But like I said, the end goal is always to get to the definition of done. All right, causing the removal of impediments to the Scrum team's progress. Impediments, like I mentioned, those are roadblocks. If it's a stakeholder that we need to reach out to so we can understand requirements, or if there is some new news that came up that may affect the team, we want to make sure that the team understands that and how it may potentially become an impediment in the future, and how we could remove that roadblock. So just removing impediments at all costs is important as the Scrum Master. Ensuring that all Scrum events take place and are positive, productive, and kept within a time box. Yes, as I mentioned, you want to be a positive person, just like a coach. I don't know if any of you all played sports, but I've been on some teams where my coach did not do a good job, and unfortunately, it transcended to the how the way that the rest of the team performed. So with being positive and always understanding to put your problems to the side and just being able to understand when you're at work, you want to, be positive, you want to be productive, you want to be organized. And so then ultimately stay within the time box. That's very important. If we say a meeting's from 9 to 9:15, and usually a daily stand-up is 15 minutes, then we want to make sure it's 15 minutes or less. If we say a meeting is going to be 30 minutes, we want to make sure it's 30 minutes or less, because other people that's part of this meeting, they have other things to do. So when we're coming close to the time, hey, 2-minute warning. Or hey, when we're up at time, hey, we appreciate everybody's feedback. We are at time right now. So if we didn't get everything ironed out in this meeting, I can set up a part 2 of this meeting, or we could do a parking lot and just we can answer any other questions via email. But like I said, you want to be that facilitator to make sure that everybody is understanding that this is the time that things should be done. And thank you all. I want to give everyone a kudos for being on time for class today, because that was us keeping within the time box. All right. So, and this talks about how, the dynamic duo of Scrum Master and Product Owner serve each other in several ways. And you can read this quickly. And of course, this talks about the Scrum events. We want to kind of look at this as, a chronological thing, but essentially the Scrum events are the sprint. What happens during the sprint, as I mentioned, is a month or less, so 4 weeks to 2 weeks usually. This is the, and we're going to go through this later on in one of our future classes, what a sprint looks like, where we do the sprint planning, the daily scrums, which is the daily stand-up that we did earlier, the sprint review, the sprint retrospective, and so then what happens within the sprints. We'll go through some of these scenarios throughout the class, so looking forward to showing you all that. And like I said, this is a breakdown of what each one means. That's why I highly encourage you all to read this document, because this is very in-depth on what a day-to-day life of a Scrum Master, product owner, business analyst, whatever have you, anybody that's part of the Scrum team, what that looks like a day in the life. Like I said, this is a breakdown, the sprint planning, the daily Scrum, DSU. Like I mentioned, it's 15 minutes or less. Like we talked about, hey, what did we do today? What did we do yesterday? Any impediments or bottlenecks? Sprint review. It's like we talked about earlier, we want to inspect various outcomes. So inspection is very important, and that was one of the pillars that we spoke about earlier. Sprint retrospective. It's pretty important as well. This pretty much talks about, identifies anything that we could improve from that sprint that we just done. Like I said, this is kind of like a larger version of the daily stand-up. As we see right here, we discuss what went well, what problems we encountered, and how we can potentially solve those problems. So kind of like I said, a larger version of the daily stand-up, if you can compare the two. Scrum artifacts, whatever we create, we want to archive it, and it pretty much represents work or what we've created. All right. And sorry about that. This is what we spoke about earlier, the product backlog, which talks about the product goal. Like I said, that's more of a macro lens, larger lens. Sprint backlog, it's like a short lens, a smaller lens. And so their increment, which is either on a smaller scale, but once we get done, we want to get the definition done. All right, this talks about the product backlog. I briefly spoke about that earlier. A product backlog is a large list ordered or in order based upon what we need to get done. And it's, like I said, it's self-organized and completed by the Scrum team, which is the team that that we are all on as either a product owner, the Scrum Master, or the BA, business analyst. It's kind of dives into a little bit more of what I gave overviews on, the sprint backlog, the goal of the sprint, and everything in between that 1 month or less, 4 weeks, 2 to 4 week type of time box of a sprint. Talks about that increment. Increment is a piece of software. It's very small, but it gets done throughout the sprint. So like I said, you want to think of incremental, small, sprint, a little larger, product, backlog, the whole thing, the whole project. Talks about the definition of done, and we'll go more into depth on that, but I highly encourage you all to read that as well. And so these are endnotes and a few acknowledgements. Okay, all right. With that being said, does anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns about the Scrum Guide 2020?
I do have a question. When it comes to daily projects and whatnot, how many Scrum Masters will be working on a project at a time?
I'll let you answer that, Josh.
Okay, so pretty much it depends on the project. There's different Agile environments. So the Agile environment I work in is scaled Agile framework. So pretty much we're working on different tasks for the same project at the same time. So like I work for Comcast. My team is Team Playbook. We have 2 teams within that. One team is a front end and a back end. And so pretty much if you go to check out something on Comcast, based on the stuff that you enter, you'll get different offers presented to you. And we work on the offers based on the credentials you put in. We tell the system pretty much what's going to populate on the web page. We determine how that experience looks, like what you're going to interface with on that page. So it just depends. Like if you're in a regular Scrum environment, your team is probably going to have their own product backlog that they're working on tasks for. And another team is going to have their own product backlog. But in the scaled Agile environment, we have product backlogs where we use the same like features and we'll work on different stories to complete those features, if that makes sense. Did you understand that?
Not on day one, but I think I get
it. Brother, I get it. It's a lot to take in. You said you were a teacher, right?
Yes.
Brother, I was a teacher as well. 2017 to 18, I was a 7th, 8th grade social studies teacher. 18 to 19, I was a paraeducator. And 19 to 20, I was a paraeducator for pre-K as well. Okay. Fortunately for me, I took a class similar to this one for business analysts right before the pandemic. And so while working remotely, I was able to like complete the course, start interviewing, and I was able to land a job at UPS on their IT team working internationally. And then I just switched over to Comcast in October and November this past year. So just keep following the process. It sounds super far-fetched and high level, but once you get into it and get practicing with it, it's really not hard, especially with you having to deal with IEPs and different children and dealing with their parents, brother. If you can deal with that, this IT stuff is a piece of cake. So just stay with the course. I know it's all up here, but in a couple of weeks, it's going to be right here and you'll be good to go.
I appreciate the words of encouragement.
No problem, brother. Thank you for what you do with the children.
Thank you as well. You was working in Baltimore City?
Yes, sir. Couldn't do it no more, man.
Hey, you God sent, man. You God sent.
Brother, it's stressful as hell, man. A lot. Honestly, my middle school was on Project Baltimore several times, so I'm so happy that I left.
I hear that.
Yeah, and just to add on, to kind of break it down a little bit more on what Coach Josh has mentioned, when it comes to, and hopefully this kind of answers your question, Dre. Teams are, say if you're, and let's go back to the WhatsApp example. WhatsApp is a large organization and they have different Scrum teams that work on different things. So the messaging team may specifically just work on messaging. they may have, and this is just for this example, they may have just one Scrum guy. I mean, they may have one Scrum Master. They may have, you know, four developers, which are the people, you know, 2 front end, 2 back end developers. They may have 2 QA people, which are, you know, people that quality assurance people that pretty much test the whatever the front and back end people build. So that's 6 people total. You may have yourself as the Scrum Master, and you may have the product owner that is giving the requirements to the whole team. And last but not least, they may have a BA as well. So 9 people, and that's all for just the messaging side of WhatsApp. They may have another team that does the video side, and that may be a smaller team or maybe a larger team, but essentially like we looked at on the Scrum Guide 2020, the team doesn't need to be more than 10 people. And they may have some people that may, they may have a last but not least, another team that works on payments that we may not know anything about, but they are still working on the back end to get payments on WhatsApp. So this is an example of with WhatsApp, how this scenario is 3 Scrum Masters, and of course they may interact with each other, but ultimately they all are doing their own jobs at the end of the day. Does that kind of answer your question, or not really so?
It does. It does.
Okay. Yeah. So like I said, that's just with that example, but nonetheless, when we start doing sprints ourselves, you'll understand a lot more easier. Trust me. I learned through examples. So through some of the examples that we have to offer through this class, I think you'll really get a breakdown and understand what's going on through a sprint ceremony. So with that being said, we're going to transition. We're about halfway through the class, a little before halfway through. We have a PowerPoint presentation. What we have lined up for the rest of the class right now is we have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to present to you all. And from then, we're going to stop recording, and it's just going to be a raw session where you can access anything, and you know, we'll let you know a little bit more about our journey, and vice versa. We'll want to know a little bit more about your journey and what's your end goal. And like I said, we want that to be on a in a private space. So with that being said, we're going to take another 5-minute break. We're going to get back at 10:15. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns before we get into our PowerPoint presentation?
I did, but I think it'd probably be more geared towards the off recording, I think.
Okay.
I'll hold it.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's take a quick 5 to 6 minute break, and everybody will be back around 10:15. So you got about 5 to 6 minutes. Thank you. All right. Hope you all are still with me. Hope all is well, everyone. We are going to start with the third section of the class, which is the PowerPoint presentation. As we mentioned earlier, please hold your questions to the end of this presentation. All right. Okay, slideshow. Start. All right. What we mentioned earlier, the SDLC, if you hear that, don't get confused. It stands for Software Development Lifecycle. When you think about software development lifecycle, it's either a waterfall version or an agile version. Today we will cover what is SDLC, what is agile, what is Scrum, and talk about the pillars, which we kind of spoke about earlier. All right, when you think about SDLC, the software development lifecycle, it kind of goes into a continuum. It starts with, and like I said, you can really start anywhere here, but if you really want to think about the beginning of the beginning, it's the evolution. So then requirement, which is the green part, then requirements analysis, which is gathering exactly what the actions are, the requirements, what's needed to build that, the design. It's kind of similar to if you want to build something, you got to design it first. Implementation, what needs to be enacted for it to start working. And so then last but not least, testing. You want to test whatever you've built, because if you can't test it, then, and if it can't work on the back end, once you roll it out to customers, that's not when you want to test, because that's when you can lose customers. Say, for example, and we'll go back to WhatsApp, say if WhatsApp rolled out the messaging feature without testing it, that would be a disaster and that would be catastrophic. The reason why is because people will say, hey, why did WhatsApp roll this out? And the end user, my friend on the other side of town, they're not getting my messages. You know what? I'm no longer interested in using WhatsApp. I'm going back to using iMessage, or I'm going back to using the Google messaging system, or whatever have you. So long story short, you want to make sure you can test it and make sure it is working before you roll it out to your end users, or aka the public. All right. This is let me move this. Sorry about that. All right, a step-by-step project lifecycle methodology. This talks about, we'll start with the red, of course, the definition, define project at broad level. So this is at a, if you think of like being on a, when it comes to like a large scope on a macro, or at a 30,000 square foot, 30,000 foot level, at a higher scope, you want to know what's going on, and you don't want to know, like, you don't need to know the nitty gritty, like the weeds of what's going on, but just, hey, the goal is to, and like I said, we'll go back to WhatsApp. The goal is to create a messenger app. Of course, they didn't go into the ins and outs of, hey, we want the messenger app to have a read receipts, and we want the messenger app to be able to synchronize with people internationally. And no matter if you have an Android or iPhone or BlackBerry, we want all anybody with any type of platform or phone, or even if you have a Windows computer, well, we want you to be able to use WhatsApp. That's more so in the weeds, you know, not at the 30,000 square foot, but more so at the 3,000 square foot lens. So just define it on the broad level. Plan, project, and development roadmap. This is essentially like, after you see that broad lens, we want to find out, we want to now go to like 10,000 square feet, a little bit more in depth, but we're not all the way in the weeds. Hey, in order for us to get here, we have to do this, this, this. We need to do step A, B, C, D to get to whatever that end roadmap is. So after you understand the project on a broad lens, breaking down the requirements or breaking down the actions on how we're going to get there. All right, the green, executing, put the plan into action and create deliverables. So this is when the team self-organizes and, hey, I plan on delivering this at this time. Hey, as far as actionable steps, by next week, I will get this done. So everybody is breaking down and understanding what their actions are and when we plan on delivering. All right, we're down to the blue now, monitoring and controlling. Monitor and control project progress to avoid overruns. We'll go back to the Scrum pillars. As I mentioned, that's going to be your Bible. You want to make sure that you are always monitoring, aka inspecting, to understand what's going on, if there are any roadblocks, or if there are any impediments, if there are any bottlenecks. Maybe it's somebody from another team that you need something from, but you can't get access to. Whether it's reaching out to somebody else to get to this person or whatever you have to do to make sure your team is successful, you want to kind of get that done. And sometimes it may take a little while, but the goal is to always be positive and understand that everything will get done as soon as it's in a timely manner. So that's very important. And last but not least, closing. Close the project and file the report. So as we all know, all projects essentially come to an end. We want to make sure that we are archiving artifacts and documentations to make sure that if we leave the project before it's over, or if the project is done, if somebody else needs to pick up and see what went on, it's very easy to understand, hey, Britt documented, Coach Britt documented in 2013 that this is going on. So, okay, I'll pick up this documentation and I can go from there. So, and like I said, this is a quick overview of the most popular development methodologies. And we kind of spoke about this earlier, but it's either Waterfall, that's trying to build everything at one time, or Agile. Agile's, as we mentioned, it's a lot different from Waterfall because it solves complex problems. It reacts quickly to customer feedback. So customers say, hey, like we mentioned earlier, but hey, I know you say you're making a cake for us. I know originally we said we wanted cherry icing, but now we want grape icing. So being able to quickly adjust to customer feedback and marketing conditions. Hey, we went to the store and this may be from my side. Unfortunately, we thought that we could do a pound cake with cherry icing, but because of the pandemic and because of the supply chain, unfortunately, there's no more cherry icing. That's the market conditions. Is there a preference of another type of flavor that you may want? So based upon the market conditions, we may have to adjust. And last but not least, requirements are always emerging. So that's what makes Waterfall a lot more unique. It reduces risk because you're not trying to build everything at once. You're building slowly but surely. So if you do have to change, you can calibrate without too much upfront cost. Like I said, and this is more of a breakdown on how Waterfall is. It's very chronological. We get the requirements and we get the requirements. Then from requirements, we started design. From design, we started develop. From developing, we started testing. So then from testing, we want to maintenance, we want to triage to make sure that this whatever we built is working through the SDLC life cycle. So Waterfall is just, once I do this, I can do this. Once I do this, now I can do this. Once I do this, now I can do this. You see how it just goes right in order? That's Waterfall. It's very robotic, and ultimately this was a former way to build software. And like I say, it still works to this day. It all depends on what you're trying to build. Some projects, it is, Waterfall still works for it, but majority of projects nowadays, Agile is really it. And this is the Agile methodology. As you see, everything still intertwines, but it's a little bit more adaptable and adjustable. I'll give you a couple of minutes to look at this pictorial.
May I add something while you giving them a chance to look at it?
Please, Coach Josh.
So the biggest thing with Waterfall and Agile is Waterfall. If something was missed at one of the earlier steps and you find out later, you have to go back through and start the process all over again. Like, let's say we missed a requirement, but we're now in the design phase. We have to start everything over to get back to that process. It's not like we can just go back at it and then pick up where we left off. So mistakes were super costly. Projects would get started and they might miss something in one of the earlier phases, but they're already past that. And so now they have to start over. And so a lot of times companies might miss stuff. It's just nature. As things emerge, you find out more information about things. And so that's why Agile is so useful in this current day and age, because if we're working on something innovative and new, we can't know everything about it up front because in its nature, it's innovative and new. So the huge difference when companies decide to use Waterfall and Agile nowadays is when they know everything up front, which is required, and it's going to be consistent. If stuff is still emerging, then they want to use Agile because they can adapt as they learn things. If they know everything up front for sure, then they'll use Waterfall because they can go ahead, go through the process, figure everything out, and then work in that sequence.
And I'm glad you said that, Josh. I'm going to Coach Josh. I'm actually going to try to bring up a video later on to show you all. But I remember seeing a documentary. It was talking about how the U.S. military, I believe it's the Navy, they are building this super ship. It's this gigantic, freight ship that's been going on for about 5 presidencies now. I think they started it when I believe Clinton was in office, or maybe the first Bush was in office. And imagine how technology has emerged. When Clinton was in office, I think we were still on like 3G technology. We didn't even have like gigabit speeds of internet. And imagine how internet has changed. Imagine how technology has grown, infrastructure, 3D printers, everything in between has grown in the last 15 to 20 years. So back then, of course, we didn't know some of the design things we may have had and some of the development things that we may have had nowadays. So because they switched over from Waterfall with this project to more of an Agile approach, they're a lot more closer to finishing up this gigantic ship for the Navy. But with that being said, it's still not done. So requirements weren't fully understood then, 15, 20 years ago, but it's now understood a little more. But as we mentioned, these are very large projects. We're not talking about just your quick project of, installing your ring camera on your house, even though that can be considered, you could do that on a Waterfall or Agile basis. But this is very large projects, similar to what I mentioned for the military. So thank you for that tidbit, Josh, Coach Josh. All right. And these are the characteristics of Agile. An innovative approach to software development that allows real-time changes, like we just mentioned, and feedback while delivering value sooner. So things are changed based upon, market conditions, as we mentioned, and, what we have as far as, your economics is concerned, as far as your employee, your staffs are concerned, everything in between. So resources are rare. So you want to understand that real-time changes may need to be done. Teams are self-organized and cross-functional. We spoke about that earlier, and complete work throughout collaboration. So we're always collaborating with various people just to understand, hey, this needs to get done, and we may need to reach out to so-and-so in the marketing department, or so-and-so in the IT department, or so on and so forth. All right. Projects are completed by working on the highest priorities first until the wish list of product features are complete. So that product backlog is prioritized by the product owner, who ultimately gets that information from stakeholders, whoever those stakeholders is. And we'll go back to the example of WhatsApp. Coach Josh may be the product owner in this scenario, and the stakeholders, aka whoever's giving them the requirements or priority list, may be the CEO or Mark Zuckerberg or his right hand man, whoever is in charge of the the head of IT or whatever have you. So we are getting this information. We're not just trying to guess it and just think of it out of nowhere. No, we're always collaborating. We're always understanding what leadership desires. And ultimately, we also are understanding what our end users, our customers desire as well. And we're kind of just the middle people. We're like the conduit to make sure that both parties are being satisfied. You have anything to add, Coach Josh?
I think he said he's stepping away for urgent matter.
Yeah.
Something in chat.
Okay. All right, thank you. And this is a quick breakdown. Once again, just comparing apples to oranges. What's the difference between Waterfall and Agile? Not going to read all the way through it, but we'll give you all a couple minutes to just read this this pictorial that breaks down from scope, schedule, cost, deliverables, key success factors, development, team credo. Like I said, if you read this, that's why, unfortunately, Waterfall, even though it's worked out in the past, is something that it's kind of being phased out, because no working software is produced until late in the life cycle. It's high amounts of risk and uncertainty. It's a poor model for long and ongoing projects, similar to the ongoing project that we mentioned with the US military. This project, nobody foresaw it going on for 5 presidencies, over 20 years, and it's still going on. And you cannot accommodate changing requirements. So that's kind of the Achilles heel of Waterfall, and that's why this Agile framework has been produced. Give you a couple more seconds to look at this slide. All right. And I love this pictorial, but this is Scrum framework at a glance. It talks about just all the pieces of Scrum in a consolidated version. We'll start from the left and we'll go all the way to the right. We'll break this down because this is very important. Who should participate and how long? So with the sprint planning, and like I said, we're going to break down and we're going to go through a sprint ourselves, but the sprint planning is the entire team. So that's when we talk about the team, once again, that's the product owner, that's the Scrum Master. Those are the developers. And if we have a BA, that's the BA as well. It's time boxed for about 8 hours or less. And it's shorter based upon how long your sprint is. And we'll break down the mathematical sequence on how you decide if it's 8 hours, 4 hours, 2 hours. It just all depends on how long your sprint is, how long you want to time box for your sprint planning, your daily scrum is always 15 minutes. Your sprint review, it just all depends on how big the sprint is and sprint retrospective. But this breaks down who participate and how long. With the daily scrum, it's the developers mainly, but since we're self-organizing, they could do the daily scrum without the product owner and the scrum master. But essentially, it does make sense and it's very important. If the scrum master or the product owner can be at the daily scrum every morning, then they should be there. But like I said, it can go on with just the developers. The sprint review, that's the entire team once again. And also stakeholders are invited. So because we're reviewing whatever we just built during this sprint, the sprint ceremony, we want to share, we want to brag to our stakeholders. We want Mark Zuckerberg, we're talking about WhatsApp once again. We want Mark Zuckerberg to come in and see, hey, 2 weeks ago, you couldn't make payments on WhatsApp. But now based upon this incremental piece of software we build, if we release it to the public, we now could be able, and this is we're going to test it right in front of our stakeholders. Now we can send and receive payments. And so then last but not least, the sprint retrospective, that's the entire team. And that's when we're going through a, hey, what did we do good during this whole sprint? What can we improve on throughout this whole sprint? And we're just giving each other constructive criticism. We're being open and honest with one another. This breaks down at the top of this pictorial. Once again, it talks about the product backlog. What we mentioned, it's a large list of everything that needs to get done for the project. It talks about refinement, which is a continuous activity of adding detailed estimates in order to product items in the product backlog. So just always refining, AK inspecting and adjusting, inspecting and adapting what needs to be built. We're refining our requirements at all times. And like I said, that's what makes Scrum unique. You can always kind of change based upon the emergent requirements. Sprint planning, we're going to, like I said, go through a sprint sooner in the latter part of the class, throughout this class. But this is when you establish your sprint goal, aka definition of done, and what can be done and how work is chosen. Of course, as we mentioned, if you're in an interview or if somebody asks how is work chosen, it's self-organizing. Our developers decide what they want to build, when they want to build, not when they want to build it, but in this strategic sprint, they choose what they want to work on. The sprint backlog, like I said, it's a smaller version of the product backlog, but it's it's essentially the key items that we will work on that sprint. It's selected by the developers, plus a plan for delivering the product increment and realizing the sprint goal. We're right at the middle now, sprint of a month or less. Each sprint should bring the product closer to the overall product goal, which is each sprint, when we go through each sprint, we should be closer to knocking out everything in the product backlog. But of course, if our PO or our stakeholders continue to add things to the product backlog, it will continue to get larger. So we won't finish it as fast as we potentially could have. But obviously, we just need to keep on completing things and off of the product backlog, off the sprint backlog, which essentially is a piece of the product backlog. So as long as we're working through these two backlog, our end users, our customers are happy and our stakeholders are happy. We're at the top right now. We talk about the daily scrum. The purpose of the daily scrum is to inspect. Once again, don't forget that's one of the pillars of Scrum, the progress towards the sprint goal, and adapt the sprint. Once again, don't forget, adapt is part of one of our pillars as well, to adjust the upcoming planned work. Sprint review, it's to inspect the outcome of the sprint with stakeholders and determine future adaptation. Great adaptation is one of the pillars. Those 3 pillars is very important. Once you get your mind wrapped around those 3 pillars, it's going to be a lot easier for you to understand the framework. Increment, it's a sum of usable sprint backlog items. So this is a smaller version, like we mentioned, of the sprint backlog completed by the developers in a sprint that meets the definition of done, plus the value of all increments that came before. And last but not least, is the sprint retrospective. So when the Scrum teams inspect how the last sprint went in regards to individuals, like I said, you want to give constructive criticism to your fellow team member that's on the sprint team. Interactions, if you didn't like how somebody spoke to you or whatever have you, this is the time when we kind of want to talk through things and really remove any type of issues on the team so we could be better for the next sprint. Like I said, this was a great tutorial that had a lot for us to dive into. Very important, just a large overview of what's going on during the Scrum ceremonies at a glance. All right, break down sprints. Sprints is a time box container of all sprints, all Scrum events. The events that we just mentioned in the last slide is anywhere between 1 and 4 weeks. As I mentioned, often they're about 2 weeks. So if you think about a work week is usually Monday through Friday, depending on who you're working with. So a sprint may start on a Monday and it may end not the following Monday, but that following Friday. So usually about 10 days later, that Friday will end. And so then that next Monday it may start. Or some organizations, they start in the middle of the week. They may start it on a Wednesday. Don't forget about 9 or 10 days later from that. On that Tuesday, it may end. So not the next Tuesday, but the Tuesday after. About 13 days later, if you're including the weekends, but about 9 days if you're not including the weekends, you're just including the work days. And so then that next sprint may start on that Wednesday. So each organization is different on how they do their sprints. At this time, the team completes the user stories and turn them into functional products being produced. So they're working on the incremental, their main incremental pieces, in which equivalates to essential user stories. That's the same thing. And so then when those user stories are complete, it's completing part of the sprint backlog, which ultimately is completing a part of the product backlog. And so the amount of work that the team will agree on in each sprint is considered the team's velocity, and the sum of the team's estimated story points associated with the user stories they complete is the last iteration. So and we'll talk about velocity, burn down, burn up rate. These are different analytics that are being monitored by leadership to see, hey, what is the team doing? Are they completing their sprints? The velocities, how fast they're going to get it done. It's not a sprint when it comes to, even though it's called sprints, no pun intended. It's not a sprint to get this done as soon as possible. The most important thing is to get things done that's workable software. The team doesn't care if it takes 1 day or 1 week to get it done, as long as it's done right. That's more important than getting it done fast. So, and as the Scrum Master or whatever part of the team that you are, you want to assure the developers understand that this is not a race to get it done. It's to get it, the most important thing is to get it done right. Like to add anything, Coach Josh?
Yeah, I don't think he back yet.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we spoke about this earlier. These are some of the key Scrum, the Scrum roles. We have the product owner. We talked about what the product owner does. We have the development team, aka the developers. You got your front end, back end developers, your QA people, which are the quality assurance testers. They test the whatever has been built from the from your developers, and last but not least, your Scrum Master, which is your facilitator of the Scrum ceremonies. It's a little bit of a breakdown of the product owner. We talked about this earlier. This is essentially kind of straight from the Scrum Guide 2020, but it kind of breaks it down and talks about a little bit more in detail on what the product owner does. Give you like a couple minutes to look at this. And while you're looking at these descriptions of what everyone's doing, just envision if you could see yourself as a product owner or somebody else, because like I said, they're really needed. All right. This is the development team, a breakdown of the development team. These are the people that are writing the code. This is your front and back end developers. These are pretty much team members that that add. They're essential. They're very important to the Scrum. A lot of us aren't going to be part of the development team, and if somebody is interested in becoming a developer or QA person, like I said, we'll talk more in depth after this presentation. And last but not least, Scrum Master. Scrum Master is essentially the facilitator of the Scrum. Their goal is to make things easier, remove any impediments, bottlenecks, make sure the team's cross-functional, make sure the team's transparent, they're inspecting, they're adapting to make sure that trust is being built throughout the team. All right, these are Scrum artifacts. These are pretty much, documentation or pieces of the Scrum journey that essentially can be read or altered at any time. It's fast adjusting. So if we look at this, here's the product backlog. We spoke about numerous times. The sprint backlog, which we spoke about, which is a smaller version of the product backlog. And last but not least, the burn down, burn up charts. And we also mentioned velocity. We'll go more in depth on, burn down, burn up, and velocity in future classes. This is another quick breakdown of the product backlog we spoke about earlier, but this is telling you exactly what the product backlog is, and give you a couple minutes to review this. And one quick thing I do want to talk about, if you see the bottom bullet, we have a star asterisk beside it. Once work is in progress, keep changes to a minimum. And that's very important. Even though with Agile, with Scrum, it's quick adapting and it's very adjustable. When you're in a sprint, and like I said, usually a cadence of a sprint could be anywhere between 1 week or 4 weeks. But when you're in a sprint, and say if for our organization, and we'll keep this as whenever we're talking about our sprints with our team, we're a team now, our sprints will always be 2 weeks. So whenever I say sprints from now on, we're going to stick to the typical sprint sprint time box, which is 2 weeks. So whenever we start our 2 week sprint, we do not want to make any changes to the sprint backlog. if we pulled, for example, from the product backlog, we pulled 4 items to the sprint backlog. These are the 4 items we're going to have to work on for the next 2 weeks. Now, if our stakeholders, our CEO, or if our product owner comes to us and say, hey, I know we mentioned these 4 items. I apologize, I made a mistake. I meant to say, instead of that, these 4 items, we want to do these 4 items instead. We can't change everything. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait until the next sprint. As the Scrum Master, you'll have to step up and protect your team, because you'll see that with some organizations. They're very chaotic when it comes to organizing. So, hey, unfortunately, we've already started the sprint. We're working diligently on it. We won't be able to change, the sprint backlog right now, but we could definitely pull those into the next sprint. Be respectable, like we talked about earlier, but you always want to be honest, and you want to protect your team because you don't want them to burn out. But if that comes once in a blue moon, I would say once or twice a year, it's no real answer to it. But if your stakeholders or if your product owner rarely says, hey, I know we mentioned we want these 4, is there any way we can swap out this user story for this other user story instead in our sprint backlog? If that happens rare, you want to reach back out to the team. Hey, our product owner came back to us, and that last item, that last increment that that last user story that we wanted to build, can we swap it out for this instead? It's about the same size as far as how large it is to build. And we'll talk about in part of the invest sizable in the near future through the Fibonacci sequence. That's a new term. That's another term that you want to get familiar with. And we'll talk about in future classes. But if both of these user stories are a 3 based upon the Fibonacci sequence, essentially they're the same. They take about the same amount of work. So, hey, we can swap out this one user story for this other user story. But once again, you want to keep changes to a minimum, and we'll dive deeper into what can be changed and what can be changed in future classes. But just keep that as a quick mental note for yourself. Once we pull things from the sprint backlog, once we pull things from the product backlog into the sprint backlog, this is what we should be working on for this sprint. That's what I really want you all to really remember from this slide, but everything is very important. Sprint backlog. Give you a minute to look at this. This is owned by the development team, aka this is owned by our front and back end developers on our specific sprint team, part of our specific Scrum team. My apology, and they own this small product backlog. So other teams should not be trying to work on this because we've already self-organized. We said, this is part of our sprint. This is what we're going to get done. All right, we're going to get more in depth with this burn down, burn up chart, but the burn down chart, and we'll show examples of that in the near future as well. It tracks the amount of work that the team has remaining in the current iteration. So it's pretty much like it's a chart that either has a burn down chart has a downward trend, a burn up chart has an upward trend. And it pretty much, the burn up chart tracks the amount of work that the team has completed in the current iteration. So they're kind of they're pretty much polar opposites, but they show the same amount of they show the same information, whether we're trending down with the burn down chart to get everything done. And at the end of the chart, this is when we've completed everything. For burn up chart, the goal is here and we're trending up. Once work is done, we'll continue to go up. And so then eventually we get to the top of the burn up chart. All right, we spoke about this a little bit and we broke it down, but these are all the ceremonies. We have the sprint planning. We have the daily scrum, aka the DSU, the daily stand-up. We have the sprint review and sprint demo. That's when we demo to our stakeholders. And so then our sprint retrospective. And that's when we inspect and we see, hey, this is what we did wrong and this is what we could do better for the next and upcoming sprints. All right, this is, and we spoke about this earlier during the Scrum Guide. This is a overview of sprint planning. I'll give you a couple minutes to look at this. All right. Now I'll give you all a couple minutes to understand more in depth about the daily Scrum, aka the daily stand up. And this was one of the quick exercises that we did earlier this morning when we first started our class. Said, really want to get you all into the mindset of being part of the Scrum team. Sprint review, sprint demo. And last but not least, the sprint retrospective. All right. And with that being said, that is the end of this PowerPoint presentation. I appreciate you all listening. This is the first class for Agile Nation. And from here, we will go to the parking lot and answer any comments, questions, or concerns for this first day of class. Thank you all. I'm going to stop recording.